Hey, what's up, Yantaraj? You are on with Yan. Hello, everybody. We are on with Yan, and today I'm interviewing Sensei Brian Ricci, the president of the Zen Bei Butoku-Kai International. Hi, Sensei. How are you today?
Fine, Yana. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, it's an honor to have you here with me. I'd like to get started by talking a little bit about what martial arts means to you, how you got started, and anything else that you'd maybe like to share.
Well, martial arts pretty much is a way of life for me. It has been. I started when I was very young. When I was a young boy, I wanted to study martial arts. And I went to my mother. I was about 12 years old. And I said, Mom, I want to study martial arts. And her first words to me were, I don't want you taking that stuff. I don't want a son that knows how to kill people. So for the next 4 years, the next 3 years, I just studied from books from the library, mostly on judo and jiu-jitsu. I got enthused by watching some of the old movies, the old Mr. Moto movies with Peter Lorre, and also the Red Sky with Jimmy Cagney. So after a while, I ended up having heart surgery when I was 15 years old, and I went to my dad. My dad came to me and he said, I don't have a lot of money. My father had 9 children. I was the oldest. And he said, I'll grant you one wish. What would you like? So out of the hospital, I said, I want to learn karate. And he took me to a gym, took me to a dojo. That day, I was still in a body cast. I couldn't do anything, but I said, I want to do this. And he said, you sure? And I said, yes. Your mother thinks you're going to learn how to kill people. I said, I don't want to kill anybody. I just want to learn how to do what they do in the movies. And so he took me to the dojo, and I made a decision that I wanted to do this. So I started in 1965 in Shotokan Karate, and I've been there ever since. Martial arts to me has afforded me the best opportunities to meet some of the greatest people that exist. I've been fortunate to go to presidential inaugural balls. I've met some of the most fascinating actors in the movie industry. I've worked as a bodyguard for several very rich people in the past. So it's given me a way of seeing life through a different lens. I'm a high school graduate. I didn't have college education, but my education comes from the martial arts. Everything that I do, everything that I have learned, everything that I have become and will become is through the martial arts.
So when you first started training, it was more about what you saw in the movies and that was the excitement and that was why you started. Now, how did that transition to why you stayed?
Well, it's a stepping stone. You see these actors doing all this kung fu and jiu-jitsu and judo, and you're attracted to the physicality of the movements. After a while, you get entrenched into the system. You get entrenched into the philosophy. One of the greatest parts of the martial arts is the respect, compassion, and gratitude. And so you don't see too many thugs in the martial arts. They don't have the discipline to go that route. Most of the students are, sometimes they're maybe bullied or they don't have a direction in life. I personally think that the best time to start martial arts in my day would be at 12, 13 years old, when a child is going into adolescence and they're vulnerable to, high pressure from outside. In my day, we didn't have too many children going to martial arts schools to begin with. It was very rare, very rare. I was one of the youngest in the class, and I was 15 years old when I started. So I was one of the very young kids in the class. It gave me the opportunity to see the more advanced and the senior members, how they performed. And there was a few people that really impressed me. One guy was the name of Louis DiPicari. He was a wonderful, wonderful instructor. I just emulated him. He had a way of teaching. He had a way of reaching out, capturing your imagination, and presenting. He was extremely skillful himself. And so because of that one individual, I just progressed, stayed with it. And today, 58 years later, it's a long time,
Absolutely. So now kids are starting as young as 4. What do you think the benefit of that is?
I think the benefit of very young children, as I said today, most of the dojos in our organization, they they cater to the kids, which is wonderful. They have birthday parties for them. They have the little dragons, the little ninjas, and they just really work to the little kids. I think it's great for them to get into it as soon as they can, as long as they stay with it. In our day, we had a saying: the younger they start, the sooner they leave. But today, because you guys nurture the young children, they have a more tendency. There's a more of a tendency to stay longer and to get more involved. In our organization alone, we've seen children come from 7, 8 years old into their 20s, 30s.
Hi. So with kids starting that young, what else are they learning besides the physicality that you would say? I mean, you've gotten the chance to see some kids start at 4 and now they're your top level black belts.
What I see is the martial arts influence is that they develop a sense of respect for themselves. They don't become punks. They don't adhere to the outside norms of society. They're more respectful to their parents. They're more respectful to their surroundings. They're more respectful to their teachers in school. It's a wonderful system. Originally, the funny thing about children, originally, for instance, the Pinan katas, they were devised by Itoso and Aizato so that children could learn martial arts in school at a very young age. So in Japan, when they started teaching the children, they saw a marked difference in their learning ability. They have more of an attention span. But most importantly, I think, is the sensei becomes a figurehead that they admire. And so instead of becoming influenced by outside activities, they want to adhere to the martial arts world. And the sensei becomes something that they look at and say, that's a person I want to become. I like his message. I like what he's saying. I like how he's moving. I want to do that. They know not to be violent, refrain from all violent action. And when you're a parent, there's a rapport between the parent and the child. But when you're the sensei, there's a tendency that the child does not want to disappoint the sensei. He may get away with getting his mother and father a little bit miffed at them, but he doesn't want to get the sensei mad at him. And so it helps augment the parental teaching.
So it almost kind of helps the parent build a team of people around their child to help nurture those things like focus and discipline and respect for themselves. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think it's a wonderful. I see today when I walk into the dojos here in Michigan, all the little kids, and they're having a ball. They're enjoying. They have camaraderie amongst themselves. They have a direction to travel to, and they look at the senseis. They look at the senior students, and they watch how they're doing their katas and how they're training with their techniques. And for them, it's keeping them out of the street. It's keeping them in a disciplined, formal atmosphere that they can really progress. And there's no limit to it. There's no, as I said, some of these kids start at 4 or 5 years old. They've been with us to the 20, 21, 22, 25, 30, and they're doing great. It affords the opportunity for some of these children to do things they could never do, never could afford, or never be exposed to.
I agree with that, Sensei. Do you think there's a huge difference between young kids, teenagers, adults that have started martial arts and have continued with it versus somebody that hasn't started it at all? And what would that difference be?
Well, once again, we go back to respect. You have in the martial arts, when the sensei walks into the room, there's a respect, there's a protocol that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. In Japan, when the teacher walked into the room, all the students recognized the teacher. They stopped talking. So today, that's something that's, I don't know if you say it's Americanized or if the lack of respect is there. I think there's a marked difference between that and the. I think it gives them a much broader guideline.
And as far as the philosophy part, what do you think is the biggest thing that martial artists learn as they go through their journey?
Well, do you mean the philosophy as far as fighting, or do you mean the philosophy in general?
In general.
The philosophy in general, it's a broader range of thinking. How many young students are thinking about the future? How many young students are thinking about my next examination? How many young students are thinking about where they're going to go in life? So with the martial arts, it gives you a direction. And it might not be in the martial arts. It could be applied to any discipline. They could be applying this to any type of craft. They could apply it to any type of business that they might want to get into. They apply the discipline, apply the foresight into saying, this is what I want, this is what I have to do to get it.
We talked a little bit about the philosophy part, and we talked a little bit about some of the things that you learned from Sensei Kim. What would be some of those things that you take with you still today?
Sensei Kim was a remarkable individual. His stories would form a guideline. You'd hear a story about something he did or something that happened to him or something that happened to somebody else in the past, and you reflect on it and say, I'll make sure that doesn't happen to me. I'll make sure that I don't do that, by example. And you see it. Sometimes it was a hard example by seeing somebody do something wrong and getting chastised in public and say, oh, I don't want to be the victim of that wrath. But some of his greatest lessons have been to me. You know how people say there's two sides to every story? Mm-hmm. Well, there's three sides to every story. There's three sides. You have human beings formulating their own opinion about something. If you and I have a disagreement or on a subject, you have your opinion. You see it through your eyes. I see it through my eyes. A bystander may see it through a different opinion between both of us.
Right.
And so he taught me to say, don't be stuck on your own opinion. The other person's opinion has validity. So that's just one.
That's a good one.
He taught us that we always had to be open-minded. He said, you're not taking karate, you're taking martial arts. Broaden your horizon. Don't be limited to thinking on one specific art. In our organization, we study mostly Shorin-Jiru Kempo Karate from the Shorin system, and we study weaponry from the different weapon systems. We study Tai Chi from the Chinese systems, and the philosophical point of view basically is the same in all those arts, because you still have to have discipline to progress.
Do you think discipline is probably the biggest thing that people would learn or nurture out of themselves?
I think discipline is one of the major things. You have to have discipline to progress in life. You can't just walk around with scattered thought processes. You have to get up every day. You have to do your routine every day. When we talk about the kata, we talk about physical movements. Everything's done in a prearranged series of movements. The kata of life is a different story. The kata of life is you have to do certain things on certain days. And if you fall out of that kata, if you fall out of that routine, it messes up your life. You may catch it up, you may alter it on occasion, but the kata of life is what you do on a regular routine that makes you become a better person in your everyday living.
Can you expand a little bit on the kata of life and how maybe you use that analogy in your own life?
Well, for me, I try to be disciplined if I'm approaching a production, if I'm working on a movie, for instance, I'll look at the project from different aspects. I'll say, what do I need to do this is the first thing. What do I need to accomplish my goal? How do I accomplish it? Who do I have to involve? Who's the best person to go to? Not, my dad would always teach me, go to a man who knows. A lot of times you get information from a person, they're just giving you lip service. They don't know. You want to go to somebody that knows, that experienced it, and so I will seek out, how do I do this particular, whatever it is, to accomplish it?
For kids, for example, how do you think they could be using that kata of life, if you will, analogy?
Well, when little kids, children, when they go to school, and they probably get homework. And what do we want to do? We come home from school, I'll do the homework later. And later becomes later and later and later. And before you know it, they're up at 6 o'clock in the morning trying to do their homework so they get into school. When you have a kata, in the kata of life, you have a discipline saying, I'm going to do this at 6:30 at night. I'm not going to get involved with television. I'm not going to get involved with my friends outside. This is my discipline hour that I have to do this homework. And it applies to pretty much everything. If the children are getting involved in sports, they'll have to say, this is the time I have to go to the sport to be coached. And martial arts is just a reflection on life. It's just how you look at it.
That reminds me a little bit of when I was younger and I was just going into high school and you were coming into Michigan for the seminars. And my best friend at the time would give me a really hard time for not being able to hang out and attending these seminars. And I was like, well, Sensei's in town. I can't miss this. And my friend, not being a martial artist and not being involved in karate, was always saying, well, why do you even have to go? Like, you don't have to go every time. You don't have to be there for all of them. You know, so I remember getting into fights with her about, like, I'm going. I can't hang out. I'm going to be at the seminar, and I'm going to be there Saturday and Sunday, and I can't hang out that weekend.
And look where you are today. You're one of the top female competitors we have, if not the top.
Thank you, Sensei.
When I was young, I started at 15 years old in downtown Boston. And in order to get to the dojo, I had to take a bus and a train to get to the, actually sometimes a bus and 2 trains to get to the dojo. I didn't have a driver's license, but I made sure this is what I wanted to do. And so after the dojo training, I'd get on the bus or the train and I'd go back to my childhood hangout, which was a place called Oak Grove in Malden, Massachusetts. My friends would be there. They'd still be there at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. They'd still be there. And I said, what? Excuse me. What did you guys do? Oh, just hanging out. So I didn't miss anything.
Right.
Now, when it comes to summer camp, we're here at Albion College in Albion, Michigan. This is the 43rd summer camp. Think about it. How many things in life do you do 43 years in a row, the same weekend? I've missed every single Father's Day. Summer camp, this is what I'm talking about. This is the discipline. This is what I want. My daughter got married several years ago, and I said to her, congratulations, I'm so happy you're getting married. What's the wedding date? And she said June, and I froze. And I said, don't make it Father's Day week, because I won't be here. And she looked at me like, what do you mean you're not going to come to my wedding? I would have flown back for the wedding if she did. But what did she do? She put it the day before summer camp. So I had to go to the wedding, which, of course, I shouldn't say I had to go. I loved going. I'm very proud of her. One of the most beautiful brides I've ever seen. And right after the wedding, back to the house, get my suitcase, get my bag, off to the airport. That's what I'm talking about. You have to make a commitment. So you asked me about how it affects young children. They're forced to make a commitment and understand the meaning of commitment.
And with that, I think they learn a lot by having to learn to have to commit, because sometimes kids don't want to do something for so long, or they start it because it's so new and exciting, but then after a few months it's not as new and it's a little bit tougher because you have to come to class. And you have to come to class when it gets warm outside, and you have to come to class when your friends want to hang out, and you have to come to class even when you want to take a nap and you don't want to leave the house. But I think a parent's role plays a lot of responsibility into that. So can you talk a little bit about how you think parents could support their kids even when their kids might say, I don't want to go today?
You know, Sensei would tell us, and I don't know if it's true today, but in my day when I was training younger, the Japanese and the Asians had a much higher IQ. They seemed to excel more. And I asked them, I said, how come there's always the top of the class seem to be Asians, Japanese, or Chinese? And he said, I talked to one of them. And I said, meaning Sensei, he said, how come you're at the top of the class? All your friends are all playing baseball, they're playing basketball after school. And the young person said, I want to play baseball, I want to play basketball after school, but I can't. I've got to go to school. I've got to learn. I've got to learn exactly what I am cut out to be. And they get dedicated at such a young age. As far as it's a tough road, there's many things that you miss growing up. I don't want to sound like you have to give up every single thing. You don't. You don't. There has to be flexibility for children. You have to give them the chance to experience some of the fun things in life. But you make that fun thing as something special. It's something special. We're gonna let you get away from your academic schooling, make it something that they really enjoy, and say you're gonna go back tomorrow to the regular cotter of life.
So making sure parents are also understanding commitment and having their kids still come to class, even though things like that might get in the way, and then giving them maybe a treat for doing that.
Well, it's twofold. The parent has to be dedicated too to the student's agenda. Parents have to say, I have to give up time. I have to be with them. Now, we just had an examination, and the stands were full of parents. They came and they support the student, which is wonderful. I think in the martial arts world, the more the parents are involved, not only taking them and dropping them off, a lot of martial arts schools become professional babysitters.
Right?
Drop the child off, and they're there for an hour, hour and a half, and they go off and go shopping and do what they want to do, come back and pick them up. And I understand that sometimes that's instrumental in their lifestyle. But for the most part, the parents should be involved with the child's martial arts education. They should be coming to the dojo. They should watch what's going on. You, as a parent, you walk into the dojo, you don't know anything about it. You don't know anything about this school. You see a sign on the wall, karate taught here, and you walk in. How do you know if it's a good school from a parent's point of view or a bad school? You really have no indication because you're not educated to that. But one of the first signs you can see is, how are the students that are there, how are they dressed? Are they all in the same uniform? Are they wearing T-shirts and shorts? Are they all mixed up? What's the relationship between the sensei and the students? Are they calling him Bob? Are they calling him Mister? Are they calling him Sensei? Right away. The word sensei, everybody thinks the word sensei means teacher. Literal translation means it's one who's gone ahead. Sen is ahead, one who's gone ahead.
Right?
One who has experienced what you're going through. A good sensei wants more for the student than they want for themselves. He recognizes the potential. He'll say, I can make this person so much better. I can teach him. And it gets a little bit disappointing when you don't meet that goal. Maybe the student runs out of enthusiasm. Maybe he doesn't want to train anymore. But one of the best things a sensei can get from himself is to see a student become better than him. You don't see it too often.
Right? Going back to what you said about the parents being committed to their kids and dedicated, I think one of the big reasons I was able to learn that dedication and commitment for myself was because my father was so dedicated to me succeeding and attending all the events, because he was there through every single seminar, he was there through every belt exam, all my classes, he was there all the time. And I think that really helped me understand how I should be committing to something that he's committing for me, because he's investing a lot of his time just by showing up and supporting me. And I think that showed me and taught me how to do that better. So do you think that's something that's an important aspect of a child's development part throughout the martial arts, is how their parent is maybe facilitating that?
Today at the examination, there were many parents. And at the completion of the judging, parents came down, and I could see the pride in them for watching their son or daughter perform. And it's a two-way street. The child, you felt proud that your father felt proud about you. And it makes you want to have that feeling more often. It makes you have a drive. It makes you try to succeed in whatever it is. There's nothing more rewarding to have pride in your child. And so for the parent to be there and support. Now, unlike many of the other sports, in the karate world, basically, all you need is a gi. That's all you need. You don't have to go out and spend hundreds of dollars on ice skates or uniforms or equipment. All you need is a gi. One gi. You wash it every time, but all you need is a gi. That's it. It makes it's a very simple thing. It's unlike the other sport. Don't get me wrong. The other sports are wonderful. They're very good. And they inflict the same type of discipline. But it's a little bit different than us. Because when you leave, for instance, hockey, you're not living in a hockey life per se.
Can we go into that a little bit? How do you differentiate, from your perspective, hockey, soccer, gymnastics, and the martial arts?
I think the biggest difference is it's the way of life that you get attached to, that you formulate with the martial arts and the sports. And once again, I don't want to degrade any sport; they're very good. But from my point of view, well, when I was playing football in high school, we had the summer off. And there wasn't too much football going on. The coach would say, if you're on the beach chasing a pretty girl, have a football in your hand. Literally, that's what he said. You know? In other words, you want to always have the football in your hand. If you're studying magic, for instance, they'll tell you, always have a deck of cards in your pocket. So you're constantly practicing, constantly. Sometimes you don't have a deck of cards. Sometimes you don't have a football or any other sport. Karate, you always have yourself. So you can always get up. Many times I can't sleep at night. I'll get up and do Tai Chi. Many times if I'm bored with something, I'll go out into the patio and I'll do a kata. It's a little bit different. Now you can go out and, well, you can't go out and ice skate on your patio. You're going to have to go to an ice skating rink, which is going to involve timing. It's going to involve renting a rink and that type of thing. And I don't mean to come down on hockey. Hockey is a wonderful, exhausting sport.
So can we talk a little bit about how martial arts helps you work on the mental by working the physical?
That's a good question. How does it help on the mental?
Because like you said, a lot of other sports like football, hockey, they're mostly seasonal sports and they're not a lifestyle like martial arts is. So when you're off the field or when you're out of the season, you go back to whatever your kata of life was before the sport started or season started. And it isn't until a high level like the NFL that you can really make it a lifestyle. But with karate, I feel like you can do that right away.
You can do it right away, and it's more obtainable. As you just said, the NFL, a wonderful sporting industry, but there's only a certain amount of people that can make it there.
Right.
It's not, you have to be an exceptional individual. I was so shy. I was such an ugly duckling. When I first came into the dojo, I was very uncoordinated, but I had a drive. I want to learn this. And I've turned out to be somewhat skillful, I'm happy to say. But I was so uncoordinated. I couldn't touch my toes. I couldn't do any of the exercises. I was an ugly duckling, gangly individual. That led me into playing football. That led me into playing hockey. I didn't learn how to skate until I was 21 years old.
Huh?
But because of the martial arts discipline, the mentality of, I'm going to learn this. I'm not going to let this. Every human being has 2 arms, 2 legs. You should be able to do it. Some physically don't measure up. I understand that. But even those that don't measure up can do it to their potential, their individual potential, which is important.
Right. So with the physical helping the mental, some people might say, like, I don't want to do the kata, or why do we do kata? So what would you say to that? What would you say to the people that are saying, why kata? After all, we could just be doing simple physical workouts and, what would be the difference? What would you say to those people? I know you've said this before, something like, you work the kata, but then you let the kata work on you.
You don't change the kata changes you. In other words, let's say there's a particular technique in the kata that you have trouble with. You don't eliminate it because you're having trouble with it. You try to perfect it to the best of your potential. It might not be picture perfect like a 18-year-old kid would do, especially if you're 73. But you will find a way to perfect up to a point and say, this is the best that my body can deliver at this time. There's no contrast, no comparison. You're an individual, and you do the best you can to your ability. And sometimes you look at an 18 or a 20-year-old kid and you say, wow, that's really good. I wish I could do that. You're never going to do that. Highly unlikely. It may involve something that the physicality just won't let you do it. So the kata is what changes you. It gives you a direction. Say, I want to do this particular thing the best I can. You say, well, why do I have to do it? That's the vehicle. Kata is the vehicle. Kata is the where all the information is for you. It's where everything that you do comes from. Now, a lot of people say, well, you're just doing a bunch of movements. You are doing a bunch of movements, and you're doing, each kata has a higher, it progresses, different level. You can do Pinan Shodan, and it's basically just block and punch. Then you get up to the Kururumfa, and that's a lot more involved. And instead of just punching and kicking, you're involved with the way you focus. You have to be more involved with the physical structure of what you're doing. The techniques are more difficult. A kata might be longer. You have to get your breathing down to a certain pattern so that you can sustain yourself through the movement. So it's a wonderful study. I am pretty much known as a kata man, though I'm known for empty hand kata and my weapon kata. Weapons are a little bit different because you have an object. Somebody said, why bother training with the weapons? Because they're not practical today. We just had a weapon examination, and everybody did fantastic. And you say, well, how are they applicable to outside surroundings in modern day? And actually, they're not physical. But the mental part of training with a weapon in a kata is that you're developing your mind for, you make a mistake with the weapon, you're dead. So it helps sharpen your senses. You have to say, we had, and several times there's been incidents, it's not necessarily in our organization, but people have sharp blade kamas, and they flick them around with the string, and whack, they go up and cut the forehead. You made a mistake, that's the price you're paying with the weapon. So it'll make you think, instead of just throwing a punch or throwing a kick lackadaisical, you have to say, this is going to hurt me if I make a mistake. So there's a more intensity to the training of the weapon. Just like in kata, when you do sparring, for instance, you have the potential to hurt somebody. You have to be very careful.
Sensei, you mentioned refining your mind while training the kata. So you're working on focus, you're working on discipline. What else are you mentally training yourself for?
Well, you're training yourself for a superior opponent in life. And the bottom line is you are the superior opponent. And you're training for a higher level, higher goal. You're constantly looking to be better than the biggest opponent you have, which is yourself. And so you have to polish and polish and polish until you're at a fine. You're never going to be finished. But the journey of getting there is going to make you a better human being. It's going to make you better at your craft. It's going to make you better as a person. You're going to be able to recognize faults in other people in your business. And you'll find that you're going to be redirecting. In my younger days when I was teaching, I would be somewhat conservative and a little bit maybe too strict. In my older days, I find that I can get the same, if not better, results in a different direction, a different approach to the problem or to the students. And I have to give credit to certain individuals. My sensei was a master. He had a heck of a temper, I'll tell you. When he got mad, you knew it. You knew it. He was something. He had no tolerance for mistakes from the senior students. I say, I'll give him a little bit of leeway, a lot more than he would. My dad was very conservative in his approach to raising children. He was very strict. I learned a lot from my father. And my good friend Wayne Newton, the singer, which you have met, you and your husband met him. I learned a lot from him on how to treat just the average person that thinks you're something special. You know, at the end of the event, people come up, they want to take a picture with you, they want to have an autograph. They recognize you as a martial artist something special above the average human being because of what you preach, what you do, and how you do it. And so you recognize that. I'll always say, they'll come up and say, "Can I have a picture with you?" And I'll say, "No. Can I have a picture with you because you're special?" Everybody has to be treated special. That's all from the martial arts. It's all from associating with people. I've had the great privilege in the martial arts world to meet some of the greatest people. I'm standing beside the President of the United States at the inaugural ball, and I'm standing there saying, how did I get there? How am I standing beside the President of the United States? I'm just a local guy from Everett, Massachusetts. How am I standing with the President? Because of the martial arts. Because of the martial arts. How am I doing a movie with George Clooney, John Travolta, any of the big guys, Cher? I've had interaction with them as far as being a cast member or as far as being a crew member working behind the scenes. I don't mean to infer in any way that I know those people, but I have worked on their movies because of the martial arts training.
When you say because of the martial arts training, what is that connection? What do you mean by that?
The connection is I went after something. I went after a goal in the movie world and obtained it. And sometimes it can be very nerve-wracking. For instance, I was extremely shy as a young boy. You couldn't even look at me, I'd start crying. I was extremely shy. I was a red-headed, curly-haired young boy, as white as you can imagine. The sun would just burn me to a crisp. I'd have to avoid things, avoid being out in the sun. I didn't interact with the other kids, okay? But because of the martial arts world, I said, all right, I want to do this. I'm going to do it. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
I'm going to do it. Now, what do I have to do it? Well, you may have to go out in the sun, so find a way to solve that problem. You may have to get in front of a group of people and speak. You better find out how to do it. My father was a great public speaker.
So that's kind of the same thing of training your kata, right? And refining it and finding a way to do it.
Find a way to do it.
And then applying that same template, if you will, to anything else you're going to go after.
Anything else. Karate is life. Life is a kata. It's as simple as that. When you break it down, what are your goals? What are your goals? You're sitting here now, you're interviewing me. Did you think that would happen 5-10 years ago?
Sensei, I don't think I thought this was going to happen 2 months ago.
Well, there you go. So it's come to fruition.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, everything that I am comes from everything that I've learned from you. All the refinements, all the focus on the mental training that we talk about, all the kata training we go through. I relate all of that to everything else that I do, in the way that I handle problems, in the way that I approach situations, the strategy that I've learned from that, and having to reverse engineer certain things in order to get the outcome I want or I need. All comes from martial arts.
You know, your strategy is correct. We have a saying that what goes one way goes the other. In other words, if you're doing something and it's not working in that direction, for instance, you're going into a throw. I know your husband does jujitsu, okay? And you go into a throw and you find resistance in that throw. Well, what do? You go the other way with the counter technique. What goes one way goes the other. You have to look at it that way. You can't be going up against a stone wall. Well, I tried it that way and that's it. I can't do any more. No, you don't. There's another way. There's always another way to find it. Like I said, there's your opinion, there's my opinion, and then there's the real opinion.
Sensei, if you were to address all the parents of our dojos and give them a little bit of advice or insight, what would you say to all of them?
I would say for them to be more involved with their student and the dojo itself. Be more involved, volunteer a little bit, be more involved so that the parents, sometimes the children want to be away from the parents, though, you can understand that. But be more involved and see, maybe get them to go to some martial arts movie or something that they can do together, go to a tournament. Be more involved. Don't put the child out there into the dojo and leave them there. I'm not saying every single time, but just be more involved. And they should talk to the child about the training they got that day.
That's a great answer. I definitely think that all of that involvement would generate a lot of enthusiasm for the student, for the child. And what about the discipline part? What would you say to that?
From the parents' point of view, most parents, I believe, are good-hearted. They're good-natured. There's no question about it. Some parents may get a little carried away with their discipline or lack of discipline.
Right.
Lack of discipline. If the sensei's saying, you go home tonight, you do your homework, tomorrow when you come in, we're going to work on this advanced technique. It gives the child something to kind of look forward to. If the parent doesn't follow through with that, what I mean by being involved, if he comes home, the child comes home and says, Sensei said today, if I got my homework done by 5:30, then tomorrow I can bring it into him and he's going to teach me something special. The parent will be involved with that and to help, versus the parent saying that you're on your own. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know the martial arts. I don't know what he's asking from you. Parenting is nothing more than being a sensei, only on a much different field, much different level.
I know I can say for myself that my parents being very involved with me helped me a lot to be involved with myself. So for tournaments, for examinations, for class, for stripe testing, my parents were there helping me prepare in one way or another. It might be just yelling at me to go practice sometimes. And other times it would be, my mom's ironing my gi and she's showing me how to iron it. And my dad's putting, the camera together so he can take the photos. And that showed me how I should do that for myself as I got older. So I hope people that are listening to it are understanding the importance that parents play a role in the entire journey, because children learn how to be who they are when they're older based on how their parents handle situations like that and how they show them how to handle them. And I heard once, values are caught, not taught. And some of those things that my parents were doing weren't necessarily things that they said, let's sit down and learn this. But they were those were the things that they did. And that's how I learned them.
You make a very good point. My father, in my lifetime, I never heard my father swear. You know what? I don't swear. I don't say, for instance, if I bang my toe, I'll be cursing myself for banging my toe. I'm talking about speaking in public. You won't hear me swear. I was brought up that way. There's no need. Swearing is the absence of intelligence in a mind trying to express itself. They have no other vocabulary. Very illiterate. I hate hearing it. And sometimes on a trip, one of my students may slip, which happened recently, and I addressed it, and I think you were there. I don't do that in my presence. That's part of the strategy. It's part of the life lessons.
Part of the refinement too, right?
There's nothing worse than sitting someplace and hear somebody rambling on using vulgarity. I won't permit it with my students, to the point where if you cannot contain yourself, then don't be around me. You don't have to quit the organization, but don't be around me. I'm not interested in that. That's setting an example. Like Sensei Fumi Demura said, set a good example for everyone.
I love that. And it's also a black belt responsibility to showcase a good example, because the lower ranking students are always watching.
When I go into the cafeteria and we're having lunch or dinner or breakfast, I'm watching everybody. I'm watching their body language. I'm watching who they're interacting with, how they're interacting, if they're happy. And that's part of the training. For instance, when I work security, I travel with the USO working security. I haven't for a while, but when I did, My job was to look at the audience and see who's not happy. Why is that person not happy? Why is he not clapping? Why are they not laughing? Why? They're not involved with what's going on. So I'm picking up on their vibe.
Hey.
Literally. They're not happy. That's the way it is in life. Somebody's always watching you. Somebody will look and say you're not happy, or you're angry, or you're upset, or there's something else in your mind.
Sensei's always watching. I was just going to say that my mom taught me the same things about swearing, and I don't think I've ever heard her swear in my entire life.
Isn't it nice?
Yes.
There's nothing worse than hearing somebody, every other word is a swear. In the movie industry, we deal with people like that constantly, and they think it's an acceptable aspect. I don't tolerate it with my students. I haven't heard one swear this whole week. Okay? If I was on a movie set, I'd hear it instantly because that's the way it is. I'm frustrated even thinking about it, to tell you the truth, because there's a lot of ladies on them. Sometimes the ladies are using the same language. One time I was on a movie, and there was a boy, a man, and he was using that language. And I turned to the woman, I said, "Aren't you offended? I'm offended by hearing this language." She said, "Oh, no, I'm used to it." Shame on her. Speak up. Speak up. You shouldn't have to be subjected to that. No martial artist, in my opinion. Now, I don't know what they do when I'm not around. When the cat's away, the mice will play. So I don't know. But I am proud to say that I don't hear that language. I don't hear that language from our organizational members. So that makes them look a lot better in the public's eye.
I think we're all very fortunate to have you as a sensei because you have such an attention to detail that those things set us apart from everybody. People that don't do martial arts and people that are in martial arts but are not under you.
Sensei Kim, pay attention to detail. Watch the little things. The big things will take care of themselves. Watch the little things. The smallest of detail. You came here with all this equipment. You have everything that you need. The smallest of detail. You make sure that this is what I need to go on the floor. This is what I need. I need my gloves. I need my focus mitts. I need the chest protectors. I need everything that is involved with what I'm going to do today. We come out here. We had a wonderful banquet last night. Then you have to think, how am I going to hang something in that room? That's a detail. Think, what am I going to use? How am I going to get it up there? How am I going to make it stay there? And so that involves more strategy, more research into the problem, more research into the equipment, the ability that you have to get it done. That's the martial arts. That's a character of life.
And then one more question, Sensei. If you were to address all of the students that we all have, doesn't matter what rank or what age, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that there's probably no better life than a martial arts life. It encompasses just about every aspect that you'll come across in life. Be dedicated to your training. Show respect to your senseis. Show respect to yourself. You are an image. You are a mirror. You reflect your senseis' teaching. You reflect your parents' teaching. You reflect your own knowledge.
Sensei, I want to thank you for being on this podcast with me on this episode. Everything that I've learned and everything that I'm able to do, I thank you for that and for the opportunity to learn all those things from you that I'll take to anything else and everything that I'm going to do.
I appreciate you saying that. Please keep this in mind for all students. Without the students, there'd be no senseis. It's a two-way street. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sensei. I hope you've enjoyed this episode with my sensei. Thank you so much for taking the time and listening to this podcast. Until next time, Yantaraj.